Imagine this. It's late in the evening and you're alone in your apartment. The lights are low, the streets outside are eerily quiet. Then, from the bathroom, you hear a noise. A faint sound, almost like a whisper, coming from the medicine cabinet on the other side of the wall. This wasn't a horror movie, and it wasn't a nightmare either. For Ruthie Mae McCoy, it was her chilling reality. Welcome everybody, welcome to episode 8 of Hell Month. I love you guys. I just wanted to pop in real quick and say thank you guys for all the support. And if we can get this video up to 50 likes, then I will extend Hell Month by 1 week. And same thing will go with every video after this. So the next 3 videos plus this one, if we get all 50 likes, you get another month of Hell Month. Totally up to you. The ball is in your hand, or the like button. Either way, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. On a spring evening in 1987, a frantic 911 call came from a woman living on the 11th floor of this Chicago housing project. And her voice was just laced with this fear. Her words were fractured but urgent. The dispatcher at this point kind of like strained to understand what she was hearing. I mean, her details were kind of disjointed and honestly just really hard to believe. I mean, would you believe somebody saying, hey, somebody's breaking in through my bathroom medicine cabinet wall? Yeah, through the medicine cabinet. I mean, the call seemed strange, bordering on incoherent at times, but the panic in her voice was unmistakable. But then, as police arrived at the building and ascended the concrete stairwells with all the graffiti and broken glass, this eerie silence had fallen upon it. There were no sounds, no signs of a break-in on the door, no immediate danger to be seen. So they knocked on the woman's door, called her name, but there was no answer. And that's when a quiet unease kind of settled amongst the officers as they just stood outside, unsure of what they might find inside. I mean, of course, they couldn't have known it yet, but what had just happening and was happening literally 3 feet away from them inside that apartment would leave a mark not just on Chicago but on horror lore itself. So Ruthie Mae McCoy was a 52-year-old woman with a life that was marked by hardship and also survival. She lived in one of Chicago's most dangerous, notorious housing projects called Grace Abbott homes. And Grace Abbott was no ordinary apartment complex. It was a towering building with maze-like corridors that became a breeding ground for crime. A place where the sound of gunshots echoed through the halls and the fear was woven into the very fabric of the walls. And Ruthie was, known around this project as a bit of an eccentric. She would sometimes, talk to herself, muttering to herself as she walked. And she had this limp that was very noticeable to all that knew her. And she had experienced her share of troubles in life, both physically and mentally. But despite all of this, she was fiercely independent and mostly just liked to keep to herself. I mean, her life in this high-rise was solitary, but Ruthie liked it that way and found, a rhythm that worked for her. And it was one that allowed her to, survive the harsh realities of her surroundings. And over the years, the residents there at Grace Abbott Homes learned to live with this ever-present undercurrent of dread. Because you had many of them that would literally block their doors at night with furniture or piled objects against their walls, wary of these hidden passageways that they knew existed, but just beyond their view. And it's true because these passages had originally been designed by the architect as a convenient route for the maintenance workers to get around and work easily. I mean, they had easy access this way to the pipes and the wiring. But in Grace Abbott, their purpose had twisted turning into something altogether that was way more sinister. And for Ruthie, the building's architectural flaws weren't just a nuisance, they became a source of pure terror. So on the evening of April 22nd, Ruthie returned home with a sense of unease that was just gnawing at her. Because there had been these strange noises that night, kind of like a scraping and a shuffling and then abrupt silence. It wasn't the usual loud noise of shouting voices or muffled television from her neighbors in the neighboring apartments. No, this sound was more close. It was more precise, as if someone or something was moving with purpose. So as a chill kind of ran down her as she moved through her apartment, checking every lock, peering out of the peephole, trying to shake off the dread that had now reached her stomach. And as she was doing this, all of a sudden she turned around and then her gaze fell upon the bathroom door. And she kind of just stood there still, her breath kind of catching up to her as she almost fainted. And she heard this rhythmic kind of tapping that just echoed from within. So trying to calm herself down a little bit, she approached the bathroom at this point, half expecting to find some mundane explanation for this noise that she is now hearing. But as she pressed her ear to the wall, a terrible realization dawned on her. That the sound wasn't coming from inside the apartment, it was actually coming from inside the wall. So this startled her and she kind of backed away, and her mind now was just racing, trying to make sense of all this. So desperately she picks up the phone and she calls 911. And as I told you before, she kind of mumbles, so her words were like tumbling out of a panicked rush. And to the 911 operator, she tried to explain what was going on, but the story seemed so unbelievable that someone was breaking in through the medicine cabinet, trying to climb through these very walls. The dispatcher asked her to just calm down, take a beat, but she couldn't because Ruthie's fear was too raw, it was too overwhelming. So her voice just kept shaking as she repeated her claims. But the dispatcher still struggled to understand her. I mean, who could possibly break in through the bathroom wall in a high-rise building? And that's when all of a sudden, the call ended abruptly, leaving Ruthie alone once more with her racing heart in the dark silence of her apartment. So if you could visualize this at this point, she was pacing, keeping one eye on the bathroom door at all times, just standing there waiting for help, hoping that 911 would send somebody. And her sense of dread was growing with each passing second. And as the minutes sort of just, ticked by, still no one came. And we found out that a neighbor would later report hearing what sounded like muffled cries and then a loud bang and thud. And moments later, the hall outside Ruthie's apartment fell into this uneasy stillness. I mean, if you can imagine, it was like as if the building itself was taking a deep breath, settled into a quiet that was almost unnatural. And then, of course, the police arrive. And what they do is find nothing that is amiss, at least on the surface. So they go ahead and they knock. They called Ruthie's name, but of course no response came at that moment. And even though Ruthie may have been struggling with someone just a few feet away, the police were reluctant to face what was inside because they left with their footsteps just echoing down the stairwell, almost as Hope is leaving the room. And to them, it was just a call like any other in these projects that they have dealt with. Probably a minor disturbance, maybe even a prank. But Ruthie wasn't the type to cry wolf. And as the officers walked away, her apartment remained locked and silent, along with the terrible events of that night that were hidden from view. Because it wasn't until the following day when a concerned housing authority worker and a maintenance man forced their way into Ruthie's apartment with one of those drills. And that's when the horrifying reality of what transpired became crystal clear. Because inside of the apartment was pure chaos, Belongings were thrown all amongst the floor. Papers were scattered. The furniture was thrown over on its side. And there, in the dim light of the bathroom, lay Ruthie Mae McCoy, lifeless and bloodied, her body showing the brutal evidence of a violent struggle. She had been shot multiple times, 4 times to be exact. Each wound was a grim testament of her final moments. And of course, the workers there were stunned. Their eyes were like darting to the bathroom as they processed the scene before them. And they moved very cautiously towards the medicine cabinet, half expecting, to see it still in place. But what they found instead was this gaping hole leading into the darkness beyond the wall. Nothing but a dark, hollow passageway. I mean, this opening wasn't just a structural flaw. It was kind of an invitation, an easy access point for anyone who knew the layout of the building. And someone had used it to invade Ruthie's sanctuary, slipping through her walls like a ghost. And in the days that followed, the details of Ruthie's murder kind of trickled out, each one more disturbing than the last. The neighbors then began speaking in hushed tones about the sounds that they heard that night, and their voices laced with a mix of fear and guilt, because they all knew about the hollow spaces behind their walls. But it was only now, after Ruthie's murder, that the true horror of the design became undeniable. Because for years at that point, people have joked about, there must be ghosts in the walls, about figures slipping in between apartments unseen. And there were very few who actually knew this beforehand and would actually strap massive things around their medicine cabinet at night to keep it closed or put furniture against it. But the majority of them didn't, because they didn't take it seriously. But Ruthie's death transformed those stories from idle gossip to a grim reality. Her murder revealed an unsettling truth about the project. Their homes, their walls had betrayed them. And then, it wasn't long before Ruthie's tragic story began to circulate among the confines of all of Grace Abbott. And her murder instantly became a dark legend, a warning that resonated beyond Chicago. And her name would forever be associated with one of the most haunting films of all time, Candyman. Ruthie Mae McCoy's story served as an eerie foundation for Candyman, a horror film that depicted this vengeful spirit haunting the inhabitants of a housing project, slipping through the walls to claim his victims. Now, while the film's supernatural slant adds a layer of fiction, the core fear was rooted firmly in Ruthie's real-life tragedy. The story of Candyman encapsulated a truth that people in places like Grace Abbott knew all too well. And that's that horror doesn't need to be supernatural to be terrifying. Sometimes it's the people among us, the walls that surround us, that hold the greatest danger. Ruthie's death transformed her into a symbol of vulnerability, a reminder that even in our own homes, we are not always safe. To go on, her story would haunt Chicago, inspiring fear, folklore, and eventually a film that captured the true horror of feeling trapped in a place where safety is just an illusion. So remember, next time you think it's just a joke and you go to the mirror to say Candyman 3 times, Candyman, 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 somebody on the other side might not think it's a joke. It might just attack you. Now, of course, the odds of that are very slim, but I hope you guys enjoyed episode 8 of Hell Month. If you're still in the mood for a very, very crazy story, I believe it's one of the most intense stories I have ever told. I truly don't think you'll believe the ending, because the ending is crazy, but that story is right here. And if you haven't seen it yet, what are you doing? What are you doing? So click that right here, check it out, and make sure to hit that like button, get it up to 50. I will see you guys in a day or two. Cheers.